When we look at ancient ruins, we see only stone and silence. But in that silence, there are voices. The voices of people who lived here thousands of years ago. They laughed and cried, built temples and cities, wrote laws and burned them, fought and died. Antiquity is not a dusty museum, but a living organism that continues to beat in our words and habits. Antiquity is the foundation on which our world stands. It was here that democracy and civic responsibility were born. Here, that philosophy turned questions about life into a method of seeking truth. Here, that man first seriously declared that reason is capable of arguing with the gods and with fate. But the history of antiquity is not only about victories and discoveries. It is a story of blood, betrayal, and downfall. A story of how the dream of eternity collides with human weakness. We will walk this path, from the shining Parthenon in Athens to the fires that burned Rome more than once, from the first steps of democracy to the cry of a fallen empire. Greece is a sea of bays and islands, mountain ranges instead of roads, and narrow valleys where each community learned independence. In the 8th to 6th centuries BC, polis arose, city-states with their own laws, calendars, patron gods, and a proud habit of deciding their fate together. In the agora, the city square, people traded, listened to the news, argued about laws, and elected strategists. Citizenship was a privilege, and with it came responsibilities, serving in the militia, paying taxes, and attending assemblies. Athens became a symbol of democracy. Pericles said that here everyone, even the poor, has the right to be heard. The jury consisted of hundreds of people, and Socrates' execution became not a private tragedy, but a lesson in how a free police can be cruel to those who question its customs. Sparta was the antithesis of Athens: discipline, iron training, communal meals, contempt for luxury. Boys were taken from their mothers and raised in agons, competitions of endurance and humility. Two models of freedom clashed for centuries: freedom of speech and freedom to be strong. Philosophy was born not in the quiet of study rooms, but in the marketplace. Socrates asked simple but unavoidable questions. What is virtue? Can it be taught? Plato created a world of ideas and dreamed of a state of philosophers. Aristotle built logic, studied nature, broke down tragedy into parts, and showed why catharsis purifies the viewer. Art became a mirror of the soul. Sophocles' tragedy brings fate and duty to the stage. Euripides makes us hear the voices of women and strangers. Aristophanes laughs at politicians. The everyday life of the Greeks consisted of barley bread, wine, olives, and cheese, fish on the shore, and goat meat in the mountains. The house was divided into male and female halves, with a hearth dedicated to Hestia in the center. Slavery is the dark side of the polis. Slaves work in workshops and silver mines in Lavrion, serve in homes and shops. Women are often confined to their homes, but in Sparta they participate in gymnastics and public life. In the Hellenistic era, some receive an education and correspond with philosophers. The religion of the Greeks is not dogma, but a fabric of customs: sacrifices to the gods, games in honor of Zeus, Apollo, Athena. The Olympic Games turned sport into a sacred ritual and a diplomatic arena. During the competitions, Ikakeria, a sacred truce, was declared. Temples and statues strive for harmony and moderation. The canon of Polykleitos teaches how to measure beauty, and the Parthenon rises above Athens like a stone gymnography. The Persian Wars demonstrated the value of civic courage and the ability to act together. At Marathon, hoplites, Peasants and craftsmen with shields and spears defeated the Persians with their phalanx formation. The legend of the runner to Athens is an image of effort at its limit. At Salamis, the narrow straits rendered Xerxes' numerical superiority powerless. Light Greek triremes broke through the enemy's formation, and Themistocles' fleet won the war for the entire Hellenic world. But gratitude in politics is short-lived. Within a generation, Athens and Sparta were locked in the Peloponnesian War. Almost 30 years of sieges, plagues, and campaigns at sea and on land depleted the resources of the city-states and undermined faith in the inviolability of their order. After the peace, Greece did not fully recover. Macedonia appeared on the horizon. Philip II created an army with long sarissas and iron discipline, and his son Alexander led it across Asia. Brilliant victories at Issus and Gaugamela opened the way to Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis. Alexander dreamed not only of conquest, but also of the mixing of cultures. He founded cities, Alexandria in Egypt, in Arachosia, on the banks of the Tigris, and left veterans, officials, and scholars there. Hellenism is the Greek language as a lingua franca, libraries and museums as institutions of knowledge, monarchies with court rituals and vibrant city life. Mathematicians and astronomers worked in Alexandria. Euclid wrote the Elements. Archimedes invented the lever and screw. Eratosthenes measured the earth, and Aristarchus suggested that the earth revolves around the sun. In medicine, Herophilus and Erasistratus dissects bodies and argues about the nature of arteries and nerves. Philosophical schools respond to the challenges of the wider world. The Stoics teach that virtue lies in harmony with the Logos, and that the cosmos is the true homeland of the wise man. Epicurus teaches friendship and freedom from fear, including fear of the gods. Skeptics remind us that confidence is a rare luxury, and that a master of thought should refrain from hasty judgments. Private destinies appear in theater and prose, novels about love and travel, biographies, letters. Rome began as a settlement on 7 hills, but it quickly learned to divide power and responsibilities. The Republic consisted of magistrates with limited terms, collegiality, the right to appeal to the people, and a strict hierarchy of classes. The Romans were masters of treaty-making, alliances with the Latins, colonies of veterans, roads connecting all of Italy. Their legion was flexible, divided into maniples, capable of maneuvering against the phalanx. The victory over Pyrrhus showed that perseverance can outweigh brilliant genius. The Punic Wars became a test of endurance. Hannibal crossed the Alps with elephants, defeated the Romans at Lake Trasimene and Cannae, but Rome refused to surrender. It raised new legions, learned to fight like its enemy, and struck Carthage via Spain and Africa. Scipio Africanus brought victory, and the Mediterranean Sea became, in the words of the Romans, ours, Mare Nostrum. Following Carthage, the Hellenistic kingdoms fell, and Greek culture flooded into Rome. Gallic tutors were replaced by Greek rhetoricians, and statues of gods settled in the empire forever. But expansion destroyed the old balance. Wealth flowed to the few, Italian peasants were ruined, and crowds of unemployed people grew in the cities. The Gracchi brothers attempted to reform the land fund, and were killed. Sulla and Marius turned armies into parties, and Caesar crossed the Rubicon and ended the civil war. After his death, Octavian defeated Antony and Cleopatra, closed the doors of the Temple of Janus, a sign of peace, and became Augustus. The empire gave the Mediterranean 2 centuries of relative stability, the Pax Romana. Roads and bridges were built, aqueducts delivered water, lawyers wrote codes of law, and trade linked Britain with Syria and Egypt. Cities had forums, baths, and amphitheaters. Bread and circuses kept the crowds from rebelling, but behind the facade problems were growing. Taxes, pressure on the provinces, dependence on mercenaries. The religion of Rome was changing. Old cults coexisted with Eastern mysteries. Emperors were deified, and philosophers sought personal virtue. In the 3rd and 4th centuries, Christianity went from being a marginal movement to becoming the foundation of a new ideology. Constantine granted freedom of religion, and Theodosius made it the state religion. The statues of the gods lost their power, but Roman law and the administrative machine still held the world together. An ancient house is an atrium with a compulvium pool, where rainwater flows, and a peristyle garden, where the owner receives clients in the morning. The dining room served bread, spelt porridge, vegetables, and wine diluted with water. The rich ate oysters, flamingos, and garum, a salty fish sauce, while the poor lived on bread handouts. The market is bustling with craftsmen's stalls, blacksmiths, potters, dyers, glassblowers. Coins, drachmas, denarii, sestertii bear the faces of rulers and symbols of gods. Technology is modest by future standards, but inventive, lifting cranes on wheeled gates, water mills, screw presses for oil and wine, concrete with pozzolan, allowing the construction of domes like those in the Pantheon. Mathematics and geometry serve engineers, and cartographers measure roads with milestones, stone pillars. Schools teach literacy and rhetoric. Young men memorize Cato and Virgil. Girls more often study at home, but exceptions are multiplying. Sports, gymnasiums, and palaestrae shaped citizens. Wrestling and running were as important as reading. Letters and graffiti preserved living voices. In Pompeii, someone wrote "veil" on a wall, another wrote "I vote for," and a third cursed bad wine. The empire became too large and expensive. Diocletian's reforms divided the administration, but increased bureaucracy. The army demanded gold, and the borders required constant attention. Barbarian federates, Goths, Vandals, Burgundians settled within and served Rome, but increasingly dictated terms. In 410, Alaric took Rome the first time in 8 centuries that the Eternal City had fallen before an assault. In 455, the Vandals plundered it again, and in 476, Odoacer sent the regalia to Justinian in Constantinople. Thus ended the Western Roman Empire. But the end is not a moment, but a transition. The Eastern Empire, we call it Byzantium, preserved its schools, law, tax system, and language of government. Justinian compiled Roman law into the Corpus Juris Civilis. Monks copied Homer and the tragedians. Theologians argued with philosophical rigor inherited from the Greeks. New worlds arose from the ruins of the Latin West, the Islamic East, the Slavic powers, and all of them spoke with antiquity, sometimes through the translations of Arab scholars, sometimes through Latin schools. Antiquity is not dead. It lives on in our words: politics, logic, democracy, theater, history, philosophy. It lives on in our habits of arguing and seeking proof, in the idea of citizenship, and in the law as interpreted by lawyers. It is in architecture, columns and arches, domes and basilicas. In sports, the Olympic ideal. In literature, tragedy and comedy, epic and biography. And it is in a warning. No empire is eternal if it forgets justice, moderation, and citizen participation. Let the ruins remind us not of death, but of the dialogue between eras. The stone is silent, but we hear it. It echoes in our universities and courts, in theaters and squares. Antiquity is a mirror in which we see ourselves. Their dreams have become our dreams, their mistakes our warnings. As long as we remember them, they are truly eternal. Greek myth is not just a fairy tale, but a way of explaining the world. Myths were told aloud at feasts, performed in the theater, and woven into the calendar of holidays. Demeter taught agriculture, Dionysus taught joy and the dangers of ecstasy, and Athena taught crafts and cunning. Rituals, from sacrifices to Panathenaic processions, united the citizens, creating a sense of shared destiny. Priests were not separated from the laity by a wall. Any citizen could participate in sacred rites and feel the presence of the gods. The status of women depended on the polis and the era. In Athens, the law restricted their property rights and participation in politics, but they managed the household and cults associated with fertility and marriage. In Sparta, women owned land, played sports, and were known for their straightforwardness. Roman law eventually gave women more freedom to dispose of their dowries. Widows could conduct business and patronize the arts. Marriage was a union of families, but letters and epitaphs reveal personal affection and tenderness. An ancient city is a network, a forum, or agora, temples, a market, baths, a theater, an arena. The provinces fed the cities with grain, wine, oil, wool, and metals. Egypt was the breadbasket. Spain provided silver and tin, Gaul provided glass and salt, and Asia provided fabrics and spices. Trade routes by sea and land created a common rhythm. Navigation ceased in winter, and in spring the world came to life. We find stamps on amphorae and cargo tags, the accounting records of the ancient ocean. Roman law distinguished between intention and action, contract and gift, possession and ownership. Praetors issued edicts that adapted the law to changing conditions. Citizenship became an instrument of integration. It was granted to communities and entire provinces, and in the 3rd century, it spread to almost all free inhabitants of the empire. It was not only an honor, but also a responsibility, taxes, service, loyalty to the world that made trade and security possible. Koine, or Common Greek, allowed merchants and philosophers from Alexandria to Antioch to communicate. Latin became the language of law and the army. Laws and reports were written in it. Orders and positions were built on it. Rhetoric was the key to a career. The ability to speak meant the ability to act. Even in the era of decline, schools continued to operate. Grammarians taught classes, libraries were replenished with scrolls, and the world of books transitioned from papyrus to parchment and codex, the ancestor of the book. The transition from paganism to Christianity was not a leap, but a long journey. Philosophers discussed the nature of the divine, and Christians argued about dogma, using the same logical tools. Councils gathered bishops as the Senate once gathered aristocrats. Debates about the nature of Christ were conducted with Aristotelian precision. Thus, ancient culture did not disappear, but changed its emphasis. The logos remained, but its meaning changed. Brunelleschi mastered the arch and the dome, Raphael studied harmony, and Machiavelli studied Roman history. In modern times, legal scholars relied on Roman law, and scientists relied on Euclid's geometry. The Olympic Games revived the spirit of competition, and theaters and universities inherited the form of discussion, where argument is more important than the loudness of one's voice. When we build a parliament, we remember the forum. When we talk about citizenship, we remember the polis. Military affairs. The phalanx taught us to stand shoulder to shoulder. The legion taught us to maneuver. Siege engines, battering rams, ballistas, catapults, changed the outcome of campaigns. The Roman fleet mastered boarding with a crow's beak, the corvus, and turned naval battles into land battles on the decks. Legion camps were built according to a single plan: a rampart, a moat, streets at right angles, and headquarters, the praetorium, in the center. Cities grew out of the camps. The Stoic Seneca taught to reduce desires so as not to be a slave to chance. Epictetus reminded us, there are things within our power and things not within our power. Marcus Aurelius wrote meditations during his campaigns, trying to maintain inner peace amid external chaos. These texts have outlived empires because they speak to every person about how to live with dignity. Antiquity is not a museum piece of the past, but a tool for understanding the present. It teaches us to value moderation and reason, to listen to others and respect the law, to build cities that people want to live in, and to educate citizens so that they want to serve the common good. This is its enduring power,